Chapter 4, The Pull of the Unknown. Grace stood by the large window in her office, watching as the city hummed with life below her. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the skyline, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to enjoy the view. It was a rare moment of stillness in her otherwise hectic day, but even as she tried to relax, her mind kept drifting back to Simon Hayes. Since their last conversation, Simon had been on her mind more often than she cared to admit. His presence in the office was a constant reminder of the subtle shift that had occurred between them. She admired his intelligence, his drive, and the way he approached challenges with a quiet confidence. But it was more than that. There was something about Simon that intrigued her on a deeper level, something she wasn't quite ready to name. The gentle knock on her office door pulled her from her thoughts. Grace turned to see Sarah poking her head in. "Ms. Thompson, Simon wanted to see you if you're free," Sarah said, her tone light and professional. Grace nodded, her heart skipping a beat at the mention of his name. "Yes, send him in." As Sarah left to fetch Simon, Grace quickly composed herself, returning to her desk and adjusting a few papers to appear focused. She didn't want to seem too eager, even if the anticipation of seeing him again was undeniable. Simon entered a moment later, his usual calm demeanor firmly in place. "Ms. Thompson," he greeted her with a nod, his voice smooth and professional. "Simon," Grace replied, gesturing for him to sit. "What can I do for you?" Simon took the seat opposite her, placing a few documents on her desk. "I wanted to discuss some updates on the campaign we talked about. I've been working on incorporating the changes we discussed, and I wanted to get your feedback before moving forward." Grace nodded, impressed by his initiative. "Of course. Let's take a look." As Simon walked her through the revisions, Grace found herself increasingly impressed by his attention to detail and his ability to anticipate potential challenges. He was thorough, methodical, and always one step ahead, a quality she greatly valued in her team. But as they delved deeper into the discussion, Grace couldn't help but notice the subtle ways Simon's presence affected her. The way he leaned in slightly when explaining a point, the brief but meaningful glances he sent her way, and the hint of a smile that would sometimes play on his lips, all of it stirred something inside her that she hadn't felt in years. When their discussion wrapped up, Grace leaned back in her chair, her gaze lingering on Simon for a moment longer than necessary. "You've done excellent work, Simon. I appreciate the effort you're putting into this." Simon smiled, a glint of warmth in his eyes. "Thank you, Ms. Thompson. It's been a rewarding challenge." There was a pause, a brief moment where neither of them spoke, but the air between them was thick with unspoken thoughts. Grace felt the pull of something more, a connection that went beyond the boundaries of their professional relationship. She knew it was dangerous to entertain such thoughts, but she couldn't deny the way her heart raced whenever Simon was near. Finally, Simon broke the silence. "Grace," he began, his voice softer, more personal. "I've been thinking about the conversation we had last week, and I wanted to thank you for your openness. It's not often that someone in your position takes the time to mentor someone like me." Grace felt a warmth spread through her at his words. "I see potential in you, Simon. You're not just another employee, you have a unique perspective, and I appreciate that." Simon's eyes held hers, and for a moment, the world outside her office seemed to fade away. "I'm glad to hear that. I value your guidance more than you know." The sincerity in his voice caught Grace off guard, and she felt her defenses weakening. She had worked so hard to maintain a professional distance, to keep her emotions in check, but Simon was making that increasingly difficult. There was something about him that drew her in, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Before she could respond, Simon stood, gathering his documents. "I should let you get back to work. But if you have any other feedback, I'm always open to hearing it." Grace nodded, her voice steady, despite the turmoil inside her. "Of course. Keep up the good work, Simon." As he turned to leave, Grace watched him go, her thoughts swirling. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay focused, to separate her personal life from her professional one. But Simon was challenging that balance, stirring emotions she hadn't felt in years. When Simon left her office, Grace leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. She knew she was treading dangerous waters, but part of her couldn't help but wonder where this path might lead. Simon Hayes was more than just a promising young executive, he was someone who had managed to slip past her defenses, someone who was slowly becoming more than just a colleague. As the day wore on, Grace tried to push thoughts of Simon to the back of her mind, focusing on the tasks at hand. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed world was beginning to shift. And despite the risks, there was a part of her that was eager to see where this unexpected connection might take them.